We got the Niner Faithful Radio. It's a hot day, and the power's out at the house. So we're going to take a little bit of a walk through San Jose, California today while we chop it up some Niner football. As always, as we begin, we'd like to remind everybody For the Faithful by the Faithful pre-launch sale is coming July 30th. Save 20% off of all our designs. Go to NinerFaithfulRadio.com/shop for more details. Also, you can follow Niner Faithful Radio Shop on Facebook and Instagram at Niner Faithful Radio and on Twitter at Niner Faithful RS. Make sure that when you go to shop49ers.com, you use our affiliate link that will be in the description of this video. It really helps out the show, and it costs you no more money. Also, make sure to go to SeatGiant.com and use the promo code NinerFaithfulRadio to save on all your theater, concert, and sporting event tickets, as well as help out the show. You can follow the show on social media, on Instagram and Facebook at Niner Faithful Radio, and on Twitter at Niner Faithful R. Also, on Tumblr, we just went ahead and did a new Tumblr at Niner Faithful Radio. Make sure to go to NinerFaithfulRadio.com. Check out all our blogs and all the goodies we got going on over there. All right, let me see. Can I do it right here? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay, here we go. And with that being said, let's go ahead and start the show.
It is second down. Ryan takes the snap, throws the slant to the left side. It's Russell intercepted. The 49ers pick it, and Navarro Bowman is redemption. Navarro Bowman running it all the way for the touchdown. No greater redemption than a man's seat. Navarro Bowman, who could not cover an onside kick, catches a deflected pass for an interception and runs it 7 miles for a touchdown.
You are now tuned in to Red and Gold Rewind, exclusively streamed at twitch.tv/Niner Faithful Radio.
All right, so we're back. Okay, so we decided to, well, actually, before we get into what we're going to talk about a little bit today, we had some very, very sad news within the Empire this week. Former Niner tight end Greg Clark has passed away. From what I've been able to discover, it was a suicide. Extremely sad. Man, it's so sad to think. It's just like, I remember Greg Clark. You know, I remember the 2 touchdowns he had against the Whackers in the playoff game in 98. Oh, 99, depending on how you look at it. But definitely sad to see. And don't want, man, please, people, you know, if you're ever feeling down, I ain't going to say hit me up because, you know, who am I? But find somebody. Because, you know, probably the simplest way this was put to me, and, you know, we'll get off the subject after this, is that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So I don't know what Mr. Clark was going through. I'm not going to say that what he was going through was temporary, but, you know, man, I really wish that didn't happen, and that really sucks. But as always, an awkward transition from, you know, real life news to football. But I decided that we'll go ahead, and I'm kind of just going to give my thoughts on where the 2019 Niners rank amongst teams throughout Niner history that didn't win the Super Bowl. And, you know, it's ultimately you're going to say, okay, well, look at the 2 teams that didn't win the Super Bowl, 2012 and 2019. Which team was better? On paper, I'm going to have to give it to the 2012 team just because, well, let's do it this way. Let's break it down position group by position group. Okay, so obviously if we go defense, 2012 versus 2019, I mean, you got to start with the D-line. and Alden Smith, Justin Smith, Braille Franklin, or well, no, Braille Franklin wasn't on that team. Isaac Sopowaga. It's hard to compare because then we were a 3-4 defense and now we're a 4-3 defense. So it's the D lines were a little different, but and yeah, you might be able to look at strictly numbers. I don't want to look at strictly numbers. I want to look at player basis. Like, okay, hey, who had the more talent? And I have to give it to 2012. Like, it's very hard because it's like, okay, you had Nick Bosa. I mean, talent wise, that might have been one of the best talented D line lines in Niner history, just because you had DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, and D Ford, all first round picks, or I believe. So it's very difficult to look at the Niner D line and compare it to that. But I mean, I have to get it to 2012 because Alden Smith, like, that was probably prime Alden Smith. And while Nick Bosa, I believe, is the overall better, all around better player, like, Alden Smith was just a freak of nature. And it wasn't until I went and did a little research and watched a little highlights and stuff like that of 2011 over again that I just really realized, like, wow, Alden was playing a part-time role and had 14 sacks that year. Like, that's crazy to think in a part-time role somebody got 14 sacks. Nick Bosa playing every game got 9. Now, I understand that, you can't always go by numbers, but I'll take, if you could tell me that you can get Alden Smith with his head on straight or Nick Bosa, I'm taking Alden Smith. Like, I'm sorry. I would love to have either, but I think I'm going to take Alden Smith. And if you're looking at pure, like I said, if you're looking at pure pass rush, I'm taking Alden Smith. Just because I feel that he's just a better pass rusher. But if I'm looking around like every down, 3-down player, although Alden Smith did become that his second year, I'm going to take Nick Bosa just because I feel that Nick Bosa is better in the run game, and is a better overall player. But Alden Smith is a better pass rusher. And then Justin Smith, I'm sorry, like, yeah, D Ford, DeForest Buckner, but I'm not taking any of those players over the Cowboy. That's the only Cowboy the Niner fans love. So I'm sorry, I'm taking Justin Smith over everybody. And then, so, I mean, would you take, DJ Jones? I guess would be the closest we have to a nose tackle now. So, DJ Jones or Isaac Sopowaga. I guess you could say I take DJ over the Soap Man. But honestly, I'm going to give it to 2012 just because I think the tandem of Alden Smith and Justin Smith, the Smith brothers, I'm sorry, I just don't think that the Niners in 2019 had anything quite to that level. They had an overall dominant defensive line, but 2012, I mean, it was pretty much Alden Smith and Justin Smith. Ahmad Brooks did his thing, but Navarro would blitz, but that was ultimately, and I'm sorry, that might be the best duo just as far as working off each other and everything that I have ever seen, maybe besides BY and Dana Stubblefield. So linebackers, I mean, come on. It's not even close. You got to go 2012. I mean, Patrick Wilson and Navarro Bowman in their primes. Look, I love Bam Bam. Everybody who watches this show knows how much I love Fred Warner, and I'm a big Dre Greenlaw fan. I do think that he might be slightly hyped up, but I do believe that he's a solid starter in the league, and you could do a lot worse than Dre Greenlaw, especially on a rookie contract. So, yeah, but I mean, you've got probably the best linebacker duo in NFL history. Plus, Ahmad Brooks and Alden Smith, although he would be an end in our defense now. Justin Smith and Ahmad Brooks ain't no slouch. And so, although they probably both be ends, still you can't get better than P Dub and Bo. So yeah, you gotta give it to the linebackers in 2019, 2012 versus 2019. Secondary. Now this is where I think that the 2019 can make a little bit of case. You had Carlos Rogers, Tremaine Brock, Terrell Brown versus Sherman, Emmanuel Mosley, and K1. I'm gonna give it, even though it's not Sherm, prime Richard Sherman, I'm still gonna give it to 2019. Oh, and of course Jimmy Ward and Jaquaski Tart versus Dante Hittner and Deshaun Golston. Now, we're talking about Dante Hittner and Deshaun Golston. We do have to put the asterisk that, let's be real. It's a different ball game now. I don't think Dante Hittner would be able to play now. He might have been kicked out the league for that hit he put on Pierre Thomas. You might be suspended for a hit like that now. But I think that I'm still going to give it to the secondary because, hopefully y'all watch that interview that Grant Cohn had with Jimmy Ward. It is a really good interview. You really, after that interview, and Jimmy Ward's not a very outspoken man. He's not a big self-promoter, but after that interview, I walked away thinking, you know what? Yeah, the Jimmy Ward gets a lot of crap. And he doesn't deserve it because if you look at it, the only issue with Jimmy Ward has really ever been health. He's a good player. He's a good safety. And yeah, everybody says turnovers. But if you're not getting thrown at, and Jimmy Ward brought up a good point in that interview too, where he said nobody counts fourth down stops. And Jimmy Ward had a couple of those. And so I think that what you're seeing the last couple of years is what has always been there with Jimmy Ward. He's just been healthy. Now that he's been able to play, majority of the games, and you've been able to see that he has the talent and definitely should have been a first-round pick in 2014. And then you go to Jaquaski Tart, who, a lot like Jimmy Ward, just does his job. And, you could tell in 2019 when Jaquaski went out with that rib injury, the defense definitely did fall off. Not a whole bunch, obviously, but it fell off enough. And so I think that it's important to note that Jaquaski Tart came up with some big plays that year. The biggest, obviously, was when he punked DK Metcalf for the ball. That was a huge game, or a huge play in that game. Yeah, we ended up losing it, but I don't think without that play, you can't say that we come back and force it to overtime. And so everybody will always remember the Forrest Buckner scoop and score, but Jaquaski Tart punking DK for the ball was just as big as a play. And so I'm going to give it to the 2019 in the secondary. But overall, if you said, you had to pick one defense, I think I'm going to go 2012. I'll take Justin Smith, Alden Smith, NaVorro Bowman, Patrick Willis, and I'll roll with that, and Dante Hittner and Deshaun Golston, so on and so forth. But I'll roll with that defense. Now, you could also say that the defense kind of failed in the Super Bowl that year, kind of like how, obviously, for a lot less of the game, but, both defenses didn't get it done. But I would like to say that the 2012 defense would have, if given another opportunity, if you had to play that game over again, I think we shut down Baltimore. And also, we'll even go coordinators. on this, and I'll give it to Vic Fangio. I mean, Vic Fangio. I love Robert Saleh. Wish him luck in New York as long as it doesn't affect the Niners. But Vic Fangio is a way better D coordinator than Robert Saleh. Um, okay, so now moving on to the offensive side of the ball. You know what? We'll get it a little bit in the coaching staff too. Actually, we'll get in that a little bit towards the end of the episode. But going into the offense, okay, so you got to start at quarterback. So we'll go ahead and we'll go cap because we'll look at who started the Super Bowl versus Jimmy Garoppolo. Uh, that's tough, but you know what? I'll take Cap in 2012. I'm not saying I would take him for the whole career, but I'll take Cap in 2012 for the fact that the league hadn't caught up onto him, and Cap came out slinging it. And I think that a lot of times with Colin Kaepernick, a lot of people look at the beginning of his career and think that's all he is, and then you have people who look at the end of his career and think of that's what it is. So I'll definitely say Colin Kaepernick was a shooting star in the league. He was bright, but yeah, he did fade at the end, and we obviously know what happened at the end and why he's no longer in the league. But we won't get into that. But I'm going to take Cap over Jimmy in 2012, just because. Yeah, you could say he didn't get it done at the end. Jimmy with the overthrow, Cap with the fade routes to Crabtree. But I would say that if I could play Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, I believe that Cap's mobility would have greatly benefited in the fourth quarter when the pass rush started getting there and you started getting balls batted down and everything. Jimmy at least would have been, or Cap would have at least been able to move off the spot, and you would have had the threat of his legs. And I think that's what I hope Kyle mostly learns from that Super Bowl is that, hey, if the offense gets in a rut, it happened to the Super Bowl. We got in a rut. But having the threat of a quarterback who, hey, our offense is getting shut down, balls are getting batted down, whatever, you can go ahead and pick up a first down, with your legs. And yeah, the offense might still be sputtering, but at least that you have the offense is moving down the field. Yeah, you're not getting big pass plays or whatever, but I mean you're getting first downs, keeping the chain moving. And I think that even with the offense sputtering, if we simply would have just been able to have a quarterback that would have been able to move the chains with his legs, I think that Super Bowl comes out a lot different. Super Bowl 54 comes out a lot different. Now, maybe the Chiefs do what Baltimore did in that Super Bowl, and they say, hey, no matter what, every play we're going to hit Colin Kaepernick. And so it would have ended up working the way that it did. But I still think I would have took Cap over Jimmy. 2012 Cap versus Jimmy in 2019. Now you're going to go to the running backs. I mean, look, love Raheem the Dream. I was there, 4 touchdowns in the NFC Championship game. Amazing. But if you ever think that I'm going to take another running back in Niner history who says, what's up, Niner Media? How we doing? Doing legendary, brother. Doing legendary. How about yourself? But let me know what you think in the comments. We're breaking down 2019 Niners versus 2012 Niners. Thank you, bro. Thank you. Appreciate it. Oh, doing great. That's what's up, bro. That's what's up. Glad you're doing good. Or legendary. But I think, and if you think that I'm going to take any other running back in Niner history besides number 21, you're smoking crack. I mean, maybe the $1 million backfield, Joe Perry, Hugh McElhenny, running backs like that. Okay, cool. But there's nobody on the NFL right now that I'm taking in 2012 over Frank Gore. I'm sorry, that's just nah. Frankie G is my running back versus anything that we had in the backfield in 2019. Now, obviously, you could argue scheme and whatnot, but we're ignoring scheme in this and just going, who would you rather have? And I would rather have Frank Gore than any other running back. Now, when it comes to fullback, obviously we have Bruce Miller then, Juice now. I think that one's pretty easy. I would definitely take Juice. I mean, he could do more, Bruce Miller was a good fullback. Obviously, they're asked to do different things. Juice isn't necessarily always asked to be a traditional running back or fullback. He's catches a lot more balls and is used more of an offensive weapon. And I like that element of Juice's game versus what Bruce Miller's going to get you. Um, Now we're going to get a little bit interesting here with receivers, and obviously you got Michael Crabtree and Randy Moss versus I'll give you Emmanuel Sanders and Debo. We'll go Emmanuel Sanders and Debo. Maybe we'll go a little KB, but I think that I'm going to take the Niners receivers. I'm going to take Emmanuel Sanders and Debo over Randy Moss and Michael Crabtree in 2012. In 2012, Randy Moss throughout his career, I mean, come on. But, you know, I think that Emmanuel Sanders was a good receiver that year. And to me, like Crabtree's best year was 2012, and so maybe you might make an argument that you would take Crabtree over Emmanuel Sanders or Debo, but I believe that I've always felt like Crabtree was overrated as a one. I've always thought that he would have been more better suited to be a two, and that he wasn't somebody that you wanted to go to. It's just we saw it in the NFC Championship game in 2013. We saw it in the Super Bowl. I mean, when it comes down and it's fourth down, you're going to go to your number one target more times than not. And I just believe that wasn't Crabtree. I believe that he was like I don't want to say like a Ty Streaks, but look at to the comeback against the Giants. Jeff Garcia went to Ty Streaks for the game-winning touchdown. I think that's like Michael Crabtree. T.O. and the catch too wasn't obviously Jerry was the alpha male. Now you could say that's when the team slowly started to transition, but it was still Jerry's team. And so that's why I believe Crabtree's who you go to because your number one receiver is taken away, not because you go to because he's your number one receiver. But he had an amazing year in 2012, but I don't know. And I'm not saying that Emmanuel Sanders and Debo are world beaters compared to him, but I still just think that I'd rather have Debo and Emmanuel Sanders. Offensive line. Now, this is where I think you can make an interesting case as well, but I'm going to go with 2012. I'm going to go with Joe Staley, Anthony Davis, Mike Iupati, Jonathan Goodwin, and Alex Boone. Now, obviously, that was a huge offensive line. It was meant for power football, but so not for Shanahan's scheme. But in an ideal world, that's the offensive line you would like. I also think the Super Bowl turns out way different, especially at the guard position, just because of Alex Boone and Mike Iupati being really good guards. So I believe that Chris Jones would have had such an impact on the game that he did in the fourth quarter. So I'm gonna go with the 2012 offensive line. Now, tight end. This is where I think it gets a little bit interesting. Is because a lot of people would go Vernon Davis. But looking back on Vernon's career, I don't want to say overrated because he had some good years, but I just feel that for what he was built to be, I just felt like he slightly underperformed. I'd like more. Now maybe I'm thinking about how it ended, and we obviously got to remember, Vernon wasn't exactly the greatest team. Yeah, no, definitely. See, I did defense in the first one. Niner Media. I did defense in the first half. I went ahead and mostly went with the 2012 The only one that I went for for 2019 was secondary. I want Jimmy Ward, Jaquaski Tart, and Sherm and Emmanuel Mosley and K1 over Carlos Rogers, T. Brown, Dante Hittner, and Deshaun Golston. But everything else so far has pretty much been 2012. I mean, tight end, I would take George Kittle. I would take, because Vernon wasn't the world's greatest blocking tight end. You know, and maybe you might take Vernon's route running and his speed, because obviously, you know, Vernon is faster than George Kittle. But I'll take George Kittle overall, 10 times out of 10. I mean, Vernon was a good player, and I love Vernon Davis. I had his jersey. But George Kittle I just never felt like Vernon Davis was a franchise, face of the franchise type of player. And that's what George Kittle is. George Kittle is basically the team mascot. And so I just never felt that from Vernon Davis. You know, I know that George Kittle is going to do everything in his power to run through somebody's face and carry people on his back and just be a fucking badass that he is. And I just don't get that vibe from Vernon Davis. You know, I feel bad about this because I know I'm gonna get shit for it. But yeah, I'm gonna go George Kittle. But now, if you want to give me a second tight end, I'll go Delaney Walker all day, every day. I'll go Delaney Walker over Ross Dwelly or whoever else. You know, because let's be real, if we're talking about the 2012 Super Bowl, Delaney Walker should be a hero because he was wide open and Cap should have thrown him the ball, and we're having a totally different discussion about that team. Delaney Walker is a Niner hero. You know, you're seeing 46 jerseys. You know, you're seeing a lot of 46 jerseys, I think. So that's the one that's the play that kind of got away. But I think. Oh, and also Niner media. I also took Cap over Jimmy, 2012 Cap over Jimmy. But I pretty much, you know, as I've communicated it and broke it down like this and everything, I think so far that I would take 2012. I would say 2012 was the better team. Now it's hard because it's like I would take Frank Gore as a running back, but I like the way we ran the ball in 2019 better. We were obviously the second. You know, I like to consider us the best rushing offense in the league when you take away rushing quarterbacks. Because obviously it was Baltimore, but you got to include Lamar Jackson in that. And so without having a running quarterback to be second in the league and not that far behind Baltimore, I love our running game. I've always felt like in 2012 our running game was, you know, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Versus, yeah, we weren't that efficient in 2019. We had a lot of 1 yard, 2 yard, -1, 2, 3, 4, and then 40 yard, and then 1 and 2. But in 2012, and obviously Frank broke some big runs, but in 2012, I just never felt like there was that threat at any single moment that we could go for a big run. I mean, look at Matt Breeder's run, first play of the game versus the Browns. I just never felt like that from our running game. Like, yeah, you knew Frank could break one because he was, you know, the best running back in team history, but I just never felt that overall from our running game. So I would take our passing game from 2019, but our running game our running game and passing game from 2012. But I wouldn't take the quarterback. I think that's kind of weird. Also, another interesting one that we'll get into, and actually, hold on. Let me see if I can run a commercial break for my phone. If I can, then we'll go ahead and do it. Just bear with me for a second. Hopefully, y'all can still see me. Okay. Yeah, so let's go ahead and let's run an ad right now. And then when we get back from our ad, we'll go ahead and we'll We'll do this. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll be back. Hopefully, running the ad, it said that we were. Um, oh, awesome. All right, and we're back. Hopefully, um, we might not be. So I'm gonna go ahead and start. Sorry for clicking on the comment. I was trying to remove them, but I couldn't figure out how to do it on my phone. But anyway, starting to get some traffic. So, like I was saying before we start the break, I wanted to get into the coaching staffs now because I think that it's very easy and lazy to say, oh, well, you take Harbaugh. He's got the better record. Yeah, but also Harbaugh was put in a better situation. I mean, he came to an already made team. And so, and yeah, you could say he took full advantage of that team. He did 3 straight NFC championship games and a Super Bowl appearance. I think that it's, you can't argue with that. It was a good coach. But to me, I think, okay, you have to break it down 2 ways. Harbaugh is a better head coach than Kyle Shanahan. I do believe that. I don't want to say better at getting the most out of his players because I believe Shanahan's pretty good at that. But I believe Harbaugh was a motivator of men. And not to say that Kyle Shanahan isn't, but, it's just Harbaugh, he had it. He was gonna grind. He was gonna, get you to give everything and build a tough competitive team. Now, I think Kyle Shanahan is a better schematic coach. If you said, ideally, I would want Jim Harbaugh to be my head coach and Kyle Shanahan to be my OC, at least that year. That would actually honestly be the perfect scenario. But if you say, who would I want to give it to and who would I want to coach in this hypothetical game, I'm going to say I'll take Kyle Shanahan as the head coach, but I'll take the staff of Jim Harbaugh. I believe that Jim Harbaugh's staff was superior. I think that, not to say that there's anything wrong with our staff in 2019, but I think that, you're talking about Sealy, which I believe was a better special team coach than Hightower. And you're talking about Vic Fangio over Robert Sala. Now, yeah, you can get into Chris Kosurk versus Jimmy Tomsula. Um, I guess maybe you could say Kosurk, but I want to give it to Harbaugh because I really believe. I remember who was it? Greg Fonzie, I think. Or I know his last name's Fonzie. Uh, he was outside the day that they cleaned out their lockers in 2014, and they just came from the press conference and everything. And I was talking to him, me and a couple other fans, and he said, it sounds like they're going to promote from within and everything. And he said, the thing I would do is, promote, Vic Fangio and try to retain as much of the staff as possible. And I agreed with him. I said, I think that one of the most beautiful things that was talked about a lot during the Harbaugh era was not necessarily so much Jim Harbaugh, but the staff that he had put together. And so I think that obviously there were issues with Harbaugh, and his personalities does grind on people, where I believe that Jim Harbaugh was probably, now that we can speak in hindsight, was going to be a short-term coach, just kind of stay a contract and wear out his welcome type of coach, from people that I've talked to that worked during the Niners during that time, and played for the Niners. But, Kyle Shanahan's going to be a 10-year plus coach. His personality doesn't wear on people and everything like that. And so, as much as I said that Harbaugh was better at getting the most out of those players, I believe he would have gave the most out of the 2012 or the 2012 or 2019 team. I will go with Kyle Shanahan, and I believe that Vic Fangio seals the deal. I believe if Vic Fangio was our D coordinator, obviously we would have ran a different defense, but I just believe that he could have got us to seal the deal that day. And so overall, I guess you could say I would pick the 2012 team, with slight adjustments. If you could ideally build your perfect roster, I feel that you would have the secondary of 2019, everything else of 2012 on defense. You would take the O-line, Frank Gore, and Cap over the 2019 team, but you would take the receivers and George Kittle and Juice of 2019. And so it would be a mix, but overall, I would have to say that I give it to 2012. It's hard to say that they were the better team. Like, would they beat them in a game? I don't know. I mean, I think that 2012 might, just because if you look at that 2019 defense, one of their weaknesses was a mobile quarterback, and obviously, we had Cap in 2012. So, I think that Cap would have gave that defense some fits. But I'd love to see Harbaugh versus Fangio, Shanahan versus Fangio. I would love to see, who would Kyle Shanahan attack on that defense? Because you're not attacking the linebackers. You're not attacking, Navarro Bowman and, Patrick Willis. So that D-line would be pretty beastly, too, with Alden and Justin. And then obviously, ideally inside, you would like, DeForest and, DJ Jones. But, he would say, really, honestly, if you wanted to go back and you would say, oh, you could pick from any team. Well, Ronnie Lott would be your safety, so we don't want to get too crazy with it. That isn't a Niners jersey. I thought that was a Cap jersey, and I was like, I never seen one that looked like that, but it wasn't. I think that's a soccer jersey. But welcome to my city. This is what it looks like. I think that we're at 40 minutes. All right, we're gonna go about another 20 minutes. So put me in the comments. Let me know in the comments who you would take overall, and break it down offense, defense by each position on who you would take between 2012 and 2019. Um, I think that if you were to go to teams that didn't make the Super Bowl, well, then that gets a little bit too deep. Um, that gets a little too deep because you could pretty much go through any team of the 80s or 90s that didn't make the Super Bowl, and those would probably be. I would think that any team would compare to those, just because you're talking about Joe Montana and Steve Young at quarterback. You're talking Jerry Rice at receiver. You're talking about Ronnie Lott at safety during some of those. So as much as I respect the teams of the early 2000s and Harbaugh's teams and the 2019 team, I mean, I think that any of the teams that in the 80s or 90s, obviously different rules and stuff like that, but I think any of the teams in the 80s or 90s would destroy any of those teams. I mean, I think that, you know, obviously, ideally, you would probably want to play Steve versus the 2019 because of him being more mobile than Joe. Although Joe was more of an athlete than people give him credit for, I do think that um, you would want to have Steve in there more against 2019. But any other situation, I mean, man, it'd be scary. Now, if you want to break down 2019 versus this year, you know, I think that it's pretty difficult because it's a lot of the same team, and we've kind of discussed it before. But I feel that the only real change I would make on defense, I mean, even I would take a healthy Jason Barrett over what Sherm gave you in 2019. Now, obviously, I understand Sherm was one of the best corners in 2019, but I believe that if we could have got that Pro Bowl level from Jason Barrett, and ideally, I wouldn't even say over Sherm. Actually, ideally, you would want Jason Barrett and Richard Sherman. I think that if we could have got the level that we expected Jason Barrett to play at this year in 2019, I think that 3rd and 15 play, the Wasp play, reason why I hate Wasp now. I don't think that ever happens. But obviously, Jason Barrett was injured. Maybe one day we'll go over the biggest what ifs in Niner history. I mean, obviously, you could have them for any franchise, but I wonder how many times we would make what ifs on other teams' franchise. Like the Aints, I think that we would definitely be on theirs. You would definitely think. I think that, yeah, you would definitely think we would be on there in 2011. Like, what if the catch, the burning post, whatever you want to call it, the catch three. If that doesn't happen, I think that you're looking at that would definitely be on their list. And maybe even 2019, I think like if they would have won that game and got the 1 seed, obviously they would have been up. They were upset by Minnesota and, in the Superdome. But, that extra week of rest, I mean, that's not going to hurt anybody, especially a veteran quarterback like Drew Brees. Obviously, the Cry Girls we would be on, like what if the catch never happened? The Whackers, maybe. That'd be kind of interesting. Let me know in the comments what you think. What would be the how many teams do you think we would be on what if list if we didn't beat them, basically? Honestly, one that never really gets talked about, and I don't know how much I'll believe it. There's a lot of teams that probably say they would take Jerry Rice, but what if the trade with Cincy never happens? And what if Dallas gets Jerry? How much of the 80s and 90s and even the 2000s would have been different? And that's crazy to think. Jerry Rice played in 3 decades. I just realized that. Jerry Rice played in 3 decades, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. That's crazy to think about. That Jerry Rice played in 3 decades. I'll have to look that up. How many players in NFL history have played in 3 decades? Um, Frank Gore has, or no, yeah, he's played in the 2000s. He played in the 2010s, and he's played in the 2020s. He played last year. So yeah, Frank Gore has played in 3 decades. Joe did. He played in '79, played in the '70s, played in the '80s and the '90s. Okay, so maybe it's more common than I think. Maybe I wonder if there's ever been one that's made 4 decades. That probably be less rare. Here I thought I had something special and everything like that, and I look and ended up not being that damn special. Um, so what else can we talk about 2012 versus 2019? Yeah, obviously there's some what ifs in the franchise history we don't want to get to, like Kyle fucking Williams. Um, well, let's see. Minnesota. Yeah, maybe not. I don't know because it's like, okay, what if they didn't lose in 2019 or 88, or whatever. It's like, yeah, but did they really have Super Bowl teams that year? Cincinnati, we're definitely, on their list. With the two Super Bowls. Let's see. Maybe the Yams, just because you got the 89 NFC Championship game. Uh, so I believe that we would be on their list. Plus, you could say all the times we beat them, if we didn't beat them, maybe they would have won the division type of, circumstances. What if, John Taylor doesn't catch 290-yard touchdowns? Um, which was kind of cool to see Jed York talk about it. And I think that that's what doesn't get talked a lot about with Jed York is that, fine, you could say now he's the owner of the team and he looks at it as a business and all that. But, at the end of the day, the dude did grow up a fan, and probably, I like to say bigger fan. Because that's like, well, how do you judge a bigger fan? Who knows more information, who has more merchandise. But it's kind of hard to be a bigger fan than your uncle owning the team. And so, and eventually little did he know probably when he was a kid, but eventually, he would go on to own the team and, CEO of it, basically day-to-day operation, day-to-day owner. His parents, I hear, have a pretty, hands-off type of approach. But I'm always kind of curious about that. People never talk about that with Jed. They never talk about, how, like, obviously, I think that, I'll give you a really good what if. What if Harbaugh wasn't fired and bulky? Well, was. What if, or even if they did a clean sweep? Because, okay, maybe you could say, a lot of people give shit to Jed for firing Harbaugh. And I did too. It was difficult. And, I think what made it worse for Jed was not that he fired Harbaugh, but the lack of success that came after Harbaugh. Because think about it. If we go to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl in 2015 with Jim Tom Sula, that's a lot different. And people look at Jed York a lot different and say, maybe they talk about, the antics of Harbaugh, handshake gate and those type of things. And, certain other things that happened. But I do believe that it wasn't necessarily a bad choice. I will be, now that I've analyzed it and gone back and heard things and talked to people, I will say there were football reasons to get rid of Jim Harbaugh. A lot of people seem to think that we were always burning timeouts because we couldn't get the play in. There was obviously the off the field issues. Now I think that might have been more general manager on the players who they brought in. Obviously, the GM and coach weren't on the same page. Um, Now, I will agree with the people who say that it might have been pretty clear then that not necessarily that the drafts were bad, but that, you know, it was kind of obvious that, Scott McLuhan had built that team. And so, I do think that I think that at least they should have cleaned house maybe. And also, what I've also heard that never gets talked about is that, Jed York has wanted Kyle Shanahan for a while. And I think what Jed really wanted to do was he wanted to hire Mike Shanahan to be head coach, how Kyle is OC, and then when Mike Shanahan left, Kyle would take the reins as head coach. And Mike Shanahan said no. He didn't want to get into coaching. What I'm also curious about is that he did stick his nose in it and did kind of show interest. But what about Mike Holmgren? What if Mike Holmgren came over and took over the Niners? Now, fine, old coach and all that, but, he was around Bill Walsh and comes from the Bill Walsh coaching tree. And so I'm not saying that he would have been Bill Walsh and maybe the game passed him up or whatever you want to say, but I think it would have made a lot more sense to hire Mike Holmgren over Jim Tom Sula, just because at least with Mike Holmgren, you could have said, hey, he was a head coach before, he obviously has ties to the Niner organization. He's a Super Bowl winning head coach. He obviously, there's Brett Favre, Joe Montana, Steve Young, that he's, been under his tutelage. And so I think that, hey, we're going to take a flyer on Jimmy T because, players love him. He's a man's man and he's a yes man. I mean, I find it hard to believe that didn't have anything to do with that hire. I think that he was so opposite of Harbaugh that sometimes it's kind of like when you break up with a girl, you look for the opposite of in your ex-girlfriend. You look at the complete. You look for the complete opposite. You want the antipodes. I believe is what it's called, antipodes. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I probably did say that wrong. I'm trying to sound smarter than maybe I am, but so I guess we're gonna go ahead and end it here. I like to remind everybody to go to NinerFaithfulRadio.com/shop to check out all our designs. We will be releasing them this week. We already actually released some on my personal Facebook. Go to SeatGiant.com, use the promo code NinerFaithfulRadio, all one word, to save on all your concert, theater, and sporting event tickets. Go to NinerFaithfulRadio.com to see all the goodies we got over there. Use our affiliate link when you purchase anything at shop49ers.com. And make sure to subscribe using Amazon Prime because it's free. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Niner Faithful Radio, and on Twitter at Niner Faithful R, and Tumblr at Niner Faithful Radio. I shall see y'all tomorrow for Faithful Talk. Till then, faith, love, and happiness. Go Niners. Oh, wait. Got to play the outro. My bad, y'all.
It is second down. Ryan takes the snap, throws the slant to the left side. It's Russell. The 49ers take it, and Navarro Bowman is redemption. Navarro Bowman running it all the way for the touchdown. It is second down. Ryan takes the snap, throws the slant to the left side. It's Russell. The 49ers take it, and Navarro Bowman is redemption. Navarro Bowman running it all the way for the touchdown. No greater redemption. The man's seat. Navarro Bowman, who could not cover an onside kick, catches a deflected pass for an interception.
YouTube.com/Niner Faithful Radio.
See ya.